Hey, what's going on? It's Inventor here, with my Thorns Barbarian in Diablo 4 Season 8. I just cleared Pit 55 to unlock Torment 4, so I wanted to share my build with you in case anyone was struggling to reach the endgame with a Thorns Barbarian. In this build overview, I'm going to cover my character, abilities, progression, and other relevant information. So first, I'll talk about my gear. Gear. Before I go over my items, I do want to point out that I prioritize strength and max life on every legendary I'm using. This is because strength boosts all of my damage, including both thorns and boss powers, while max life gives me more thorns through challenging shout. When it comes to tempering, I wanted thorns while fortified on my utility tempers and damage while berserking on my offensive tempers. Thorns while fortified is a massive scaler for thorns and should always be active with my helm's aspect and other sources of fortify. Damage while berserking pumps up the multiplicative bonus from the Blood Rage legendary node. Lastly, I wanted to reach the cap of 1000 armor and 70% resistance to all elements so I could stay alive. For each weapon, I would prioritize vulnerable damage as the third affix since I apply vulnerable via Steel Grasp and my main boss power. The weapon temper would be Belligerence as a damage multiplier whenever I use my basic attack Flay. So as you can see here on the skill tree, damaging an enemy with a basic skill increases my damage by 64% multiplicative for 4 seconds. When it comes to aspects, I run Needle Flare on my two-handed mace to get AoE thorns, Retribution and Inner Calm on my one-handers for more damage, and Death Wish on my two-handed polearm for more thorns. Keep in mind that putting an aspect on a two-hander as opposed to a one-hander will give double the value, so that's why I have Death Wish in my two-handed polearm to get as much thorns as possible from this aspect. As for the rest of my equipment, my helm is a Steadfast Berserker with resistance to all elements to reach the 70% cap on Pit 55. I could have also used an Ancestral Helm with GA Strength or Max Life like this one here, but I got this one just a bit too late to switch over before Pit 55. Alternative options here would be Tusk Helm for Super Berserking, or Ugly Bastard Helm, since it nearly doubles your fire damage. My Thorns does not scale with fire damage, but the main boss power I used does. Anyway, my chest armor is a 2GA Razor Plate. I got super lucky on this while running Lord Zir. I was expecting at best a 1GA Razor Plate, and frankly, I could have even gotten by with a 750 item power Razor Plate, but of course, I would have been slightly weaker. My gloves have crit strike chance with aspect of elements. Note that thorns cannot crit, but boss powers can. So this is meant to help push crit chance to 100% for my main boss power. A much better alternative here would be Fists of Fate, with a high roll on the unique effect to boost your average damage by up to 50%, but I wasn't able to find one with this character. My pants are Juggernauts to reach the armor cap, then Lightning Resistance as an affix, and Shadow Resistance as the temper. Again, the affix and temper are flexible here, but in this case, I wanted to cap out resistances. Coming up to boots, Now, this is an interesting one since boots can roll brawling skills or Warcry as an affix, which boosts my damage. So ideally, I would have wanted Strength, Max Life, and Warcry with a GA on any of these being very helpful. But in this case, I got GA Armor instead of Strength, so I used that to help cap out my armor stat. Leap cooldown reduction as the mobility temper would have been nice too, but movement speed was all I managed to get. My amulet is conceded with strength, max life, and fire resistance. The amulet itself is ancestral, but the GA was life per 5, I think, which is not very useful, so I rolled that off for strength here. Ideally, we would want GA on strength or max life, with the third modifier being plus ranks of counteroffensive or some other barbarian passive that gives you more damage. Conceded aspect works really well here because I gain barrier from a boss power that I will talk about later. My first ring is Bold Chieftain's Aspect with resistance to all elements and Warcry cooldown reduction to get Warcry back quicker against bosses. As an aspect, Bold Chieftains is more important than just plain damage, since it helps reduce the cooldown of your shouts to the point where you can have 100% uptime against mobs. My second ring is Giant Stride's Aspect with crit strike chance and Warcry cooldown reduction. More leaps means more mobility and more berserking. More berserking means more thorns from Deathwish Aspect. More thorns means more damage. But this is somewhat replaceable. Like, for example, if you somehow found a mythic like Ring of Starless Skies or Doombringer, then maybe you would want to put other aspects or uniques here instead. When it comes to sockets, my armor stat is already over 1000 even in Torment 4, so I tried to cap out resistances in my jewelry sockets instead. I used sapphires in my weapons for vulnerable damage, and rubies in my pants for strength. When it comes to runes, I used what was available. On my helm, I ran Kurgar, so I could get 25% crit chance upon using 5 skills. On my chest armor, I ran Lith Lum, so that I gain fury whenever I stand still, like to attack bosses, for example. On elixirs and incense, it's pretty much just going to be stats, life, armor, and resistances. Boss powers. My main boss power here is Harbinger of Hatred's Volley, whereas my modifier boss powers are Avarice's Explosive Ore, Blackmailer's Sabotage, and Hatred's Embrace's Haste. Volley is the backbone of the build since it's what I use to bring down bosses, otherwise they would take forever to kill on just Thorns alone. Against mobs is where Thorns really shines, but Volley applies a vulnerable and does a good amount of damage too. As soon as I got into Torment 1, I prioritized acquiring and maxing out this boss power first. I tried to use Andariel's Flaming Skull with this build, like hook them in with Steel Grasp and stand still while mobs proc your thorns and the skull does its thing, but the skull feels like it does no damage, and killing Andariel fresh into Torment 1 is sorta annoying. As for the modifiers, Avarice's is super useful in 2 ways. First off, it spends my fury to pump up the damage of my volley. But, as a side effect of draining my fury, my key passive, Barbed Carapace, will constantly provide the maximum bonus of a whopping 120% thorns. Next comes Blackmailer's Sabotage. This power provides barrier based on any fortify that gets generated, such as from Steadfast Berserker's aspect. Barrier not only helps keep me alive, but boosts my damage via conceded aspect too. Finally, there's Hatred's Embrace's Haste for up to 50% crit strike chance. Again, crit strike chance does not help Thorns, but it does amp the damage of my volley, which I so desperately need to kill bosses. Skills. Now, I'm not going to go over every single point that I invested in my skill tree, especially not the passive modifiers. But what I can say is that I used the key passive Barbed Carapace. Barbed Carapace's effect is that for every 25 Fury that I spend, I gain 10% Thorns up to 120% Thorns for 8 seconds. If I use a skill with a cooldown, I also can run through monsters during 5 seconds, and while this effect is active, I get damage equal to my Thorns as physical damage to close enemies every second. On my skill bar, I run Leap, Steel Grasp, Warcry, Challenging Shout, Flay, and Wrath of the Berserker. The playstyle of this build is pretty simple. You open up by running or leaping past mobs first and luring as many monsters as you can. When you have a large enough pack, use Steel Grasp to apply Vulnerable and pull monsters to you. You activate Warcry for berserking and to get more damage, Challenging Shout for taunt, DR, life, and thorns. Then you can just start attacking with Flay to generate and spend Fury for Barbed Carapace. You also have Wrath of the Berserker to break yourself out of disables or in case you need more damage. Against bosses, your skill rotation is similar to versus mobs. The majority of your damage, however, will come from your main boss power. So to activate it, open up with Steel Grasp to apply Vulnerable on the boss. Use Warcry and Challenging Shout to boost your damage and survivability, and then try to hit the boss with Flay while standing still. Avoid getting hit by any attacks that might kill you, and it should only be a matter of time before the boss goes down. Remember to pop your ult for damage or anti-CC. Paragon. So far, I used 157 Paragon points. For my boards, I ran the starting board with Challenger Glyph, Weapons Master with Might Glyph, Blood Rage with Revenge Glyph, and Decimator with Executioner Glyph. The glyphs I was using were all rank 15 or above, with Executioner sitting at rank 46. I prioritized leveling Executioner first, since its additive damage boost works with my Thorns and main boss power. You might notice that I am missing a board here. That's just because I simply didn't need a 5th board by the time I cleared Pit 55. But if I did use more Paragon points, I would have picked up Warbringer with Wrathglyph. Warbringer generates Fortify and could either complement or replace Steadfast Berserker's aspect, whereas Wrathglyph gives more crit strike damage for Harbinger's Volley. Mercenaries. I used no mercenary for my run since I figured it would be better for me to draw all the aggro, but in hindsight I think that's a terrible idea in the long term. The bonuses given by mercenaries are just too good to ignore if you own the expansion, not to mention that they give you report caches to help gear you up too. So I would recommend either Rahir or Subo as a hired mercenary. Rahir provides resistances and damage, and Subo lets you know where mobs are when you want to pull them in. As a reinforcement, I would go with Aldkin for Field of Languish to get DR when you get CC'd. Progression. From level 1 to 60, this one is a bit more complicated than other 1 to 60s I've done, but Thorns scales really well during leveling against everything except for bosses. The gist of my 1 to 60 is to grab my aspects first, spam incursions to 50, do strongholds to 59, and then you pop your renown rewards to reach level 60. First, get this build's aspects from dungeons on normal difficulty. That would be Deathwish aspect first, and then Needle Flare aspect second. Then I actually ran Helltides on normal and then turned in Cinders on Penitent. But to keep things simple, I would recommend for you to spam incursions on normal or hard, so that you can get XP in Spectral Ash until you reach level 50. On hard mode, there should be plenty of other players to run incursions with, but if it's too troublesome on hard, then you should be fine on normal. To amp up your overall damage output, you want Natural Schemes recipe on utility slots, Deathwish aspect on your two-handed slashing weapon, and Needle Flare aspect on your two-handed bludgeoning weapon. From level 50, I run every stronghold and renown rewards to get from 50 to 60, and then after picking up 750 item powers from gambling or with pale marks, and using the right tempers and aspects, I go and clear Pit 10 to unlock Torment 1. As for Torment 1 to 4, as soon as you reach Torment 1, get your boss powers ASAP. You don't need boss mats, you just need to successfully kill whichever boss you want powers from. So in this case, prioritize Lord Zir's power first, since it should be pretty easy to pick up as a placeholder before you get Volley as the main power or Avarice as the modifier power. Once you get Zir's pool, try to unlock Harbinger of Hatred's Volley if you can. Otherwise, keep upgrading your gear until you can pick it up. I wouldn't leave Torment 1 without picking up Volley first. Then, I kid you not, spam incursions on Torment 1 or 2 until you get Volley at max rank and your other powers to at least rank 11. Doing this should take about an hour, maybe 2 hours tops on Torment, and you get plenty of boss mats and other loot in the process. In Torment 2, you want to pick up as many Ancestral Legendaries as possible. You can get these via gambling with Obols, Reputation caches, Report rewards, Whispers, Tributes, and etc. Around this time, try to run Lord Zir 2 so that you can get a Razor Plate if you haven't acquired one already. Lord Zir on Torment 2 should not be a problem with a maxed out Volley and 1 or 2 active legendary nodes, but if you find yourself struggling, you can tone it down to Torment 1 if you really want. It just might take a bit longer to find a Razor Plate if you do this. Finally, for Torment 3, this is where you should grind out Obdicite for masterworking through Tributes, Infernal Hordes, or Nightmare Dungeons. Also, of course, you should get your glyphs to at least rank 15 as well. All of these steps together should get you up to Torment 4. There's more I could say in this video, but I think this should give you a general guideline on where to get started if you want to make a Thorns Barbarian. It's a build that does great against mobs, scales its damage pretty well with max life, and typically struggles with bosses, but the boss powers this season help mitigate that weakness a bit. I hope this helps. If you made it this far, then a like, comment, or subscribe is always appreciated. But otherwise, that's all for me. Thanks everyone for watching. Adventure out.